Hey everyone, welcome back. Get ready, because today we are diving deep into some seriously awesome vocabulary.
That's right. We're going to be exploring 30 advanced words from the Oxford 5,000 word list.
Yep, we're talking words 1351 to 1380. And let me tell you, these words are going to take your English skills to the next level.
Absolutely. Having a strong vocabulary is key for clear and nuanced communication.
It's like having more colors in your paint box. You can express yourself in so many more ways.
Exactly. So let's get started.
Okay, our first word is preach.
To preach means to deliver a speech about religious or moral beliefs, often with the goal of persuading others.
Like you might hear someone say, the pastor preached a powerful sermon about forgiveness.
Or, the activist preached about the importance of social justice.
And hey, sometimes you'll even hear it in a more everyday context, like, my grandma preaches the benefits of a good night's sleep. Speaking of coming before something, our next word is precede, which kind of has that same sense of order.
Precede means to come before something else in time order or rank.
So you could say, the appetizers preceded the main course.
Or, the invention of the printing press preceded the internet.
And sometimes it's used to highlight a cause and effect relationship, like heavy rains often precede flooding. That sense of order and influence brings us to our next word, precedent.
Precedent refers to an earlier event or action that serves as an example or guide for later situations.
It's like setting a standard. Like in a legal context, the Supreme Court ruling set a precedent for future cases.
Exactly. And you see it in everyday life, too. Like, her promotion set a precedent for other women in the company.
It's really interesting to think about how past precedents shape our present. All right, let's shift gears to a word that evokes feelings of value and importance, precious.
Precious describes something of great value, either materially or emotionally, something rare or irreplaceable.
Like the family heirloom was her most precious possession.
Or a time with loved ones is precious.
And even something small can be precious. Like the child held a tiny seashell as if it were a precious jewel. From precious to precise, our next word is all about accuracy and detail.
Precise means exact and accurate, leaving no room for ambiguity.
A scientist might say, the experiment requires precise measurements.
Or, the engineer made precise calculations for the bridge's construction.
And sometimes it's used to express frustration with imprecision, like, I asked for a light trim, not a whole new hairstyle. Can you be a little more precise next time, please?
Yeah.
Now, to emphasize that accuracy, we use the word precisely.
That's right. Precisely means exactly or accurately, often used to emphasize a point or confirm agreement.
Like you might hear, you're precisely right. I completely agree.
Or the package arrived precisely at 10 a.m.
You could also add a touch of drama, like she opened the secret box and whispered, this is precisely what I was looking for. Now let's dig into the quality of being precise with our next word, precision.
Precision refers to the quality of being exact and accurate. It often highlights the skill and care involved in achieving that accuracy.
So a surgeon might be praised for their remarkable precision during the operation.
Or a watchmaker might be known for the precision of their handcrafted timepieces.
And even in everyday life, we could admire the precision of a dancer's movements. From precision, let's go into the wild with our next word, predator.
A predator is an animal that hunts and kills other animals for food.
We often think of powerful hunters like, the lion is a fearsome predator.
Or the hawk is a skilled aerial predator.
But the term can also be used metaphorically, like, the company was seen as a predator in the market, aggressively taking over its competitors. Speaking of things that came before, our next word is all about those who held positions before us.
Predecessor refers to someone or something that came before another in a specific role.
Like you could say, the new CEO had big shoes to fill, following in the footsteps of her successful predecessor.
Or, this new model of the phone is a big improvement over its predecessor.
Sometimes it's used in a funny way, too, like, my predecessor in this apartment left the place a total mess. From predecessors, let's move on to something a bit more expected, predictable.
Predictable describes something that is expected or likely to happen.
We often use it to talk about things like, The ending of the movie was so predictable.
Or the team's victory was predictable given their strong performance all season.
And of course, there's always, my dog's reaction to the word walk is totally predictable. Pure excitement. Now let's shift to a word that describes something that is the most common or widespread predominantly.
Predominantly means mainly or for the most part.
You might hear someone say, the population in this neighborhood is predominantly families with young children.
Or the landscape is predominantly forest with a few scattered meadows.
And in a more personal context, my free time is predominantly spent reading and hiking. Now let's talk about preference.
Preference means a greater liking for one thing over another.
Like, I have a preference for spicy food.
Or, he expressed a preference for working from home rather than going to the office.
And sometimes preferences can be a bit unique. Like, my cat has a strong preference for sleeping in cardboard boxes. Now, for a word that's often met with excitement and anticipation, pregnancy.
Pregnancy is the condition of carrying a developing child within the womb.
You might hear her pregnancy went smoothly with no complications.
Or, the couple announced their pregnancy to their families with joy.
And of course, pregnancy often comes with cravings. Like, her pregnancy cravings included pickles and peanut butter. From the joy of pregnancy, let's turn to a more serious issue, prejudice.
Prejudice is a preconceived opinion or feeling often negative toward a group of people. It's based on stereotypes, not on reason or experience.
It's so important to remember that combating prejudice and discrimination is essential for a fair and just society.
Right. And unfortunately, prejudice can show up in many forms, like he faced prejudice because of his religious beliefs.
And sadly, prejudice can be based on something as superficial as appearance. Like, she experienced prejudice because of her hairstyle.
Yeah.
Now let's move to a word often used in formal settings, preliminary.
Preliminary means something that comes before a more important event or action, like preparation or groundwork.
So in a legal context, you might hear, the preliminary hearing will determine if there's enough evidence for a trial.
Or in a business setting, we'll need to review the preliminary findings before making a decision.
It can also describe an early attempt that's not quite perfect.
Right.
Like, my preliminary sketch for the painting needs a lot more work. Our next word suggests importance and distinction, premier.
Premier means first in importance, rank, or time.
You might hear, she attended the premiere of the Broadway show.
Or, he is considered the premier chef in the city.
It can also be used in a more lighthearted way.
Yeah.
Like, my dog thinks he's the premier squirrel chaser in the neighborhood. Now let's step into the world of ideas with our next word, premise.
A premise is a proposition or idea that forms the basis of an argument or theory.
Like, the premise of the movie is that love conquers all.
Or, the entire business plan was based on the premise that demand for this product would be high.
Sometimes, though, a premise can be flawed. Like, his decision to quit his job was based on the false premise that he could easily find a better one. From premises to price tags, our next word is premium.
Premium can refer to a higher price or value placed on something. It can also refer to the amount paid for insurance.
You might hear, we paid a premium for the seats with extra legroom.
Or, my car insurance premium went up after I got a speeding ticket.
And you often hear it used to describe things that are in high demand. Like, there's a premium on parking spaces downtown. Now let's talk about prescribe.
To prescribe means to authorize the use of medicine or treatment, or to strongly recommend a course of action.
A doctor might say, I'm prescribing antibiotics for your ear infection.
Or a therapist might prescribe journaling as a way to manage stress.
It's sometimes used in a more general sense, too. Like, my friend prescribed a weekend getaway to help me relax. Sticking with medical matters, our next word is prescription.
Prescription refers to a written order from a doctor for medicine.
For example, you might say, I need to refill my prescription for allergy medication.
Or, make sure to follow the instructions on the prescription label.
And just like prescribe it can be used figuratively. Like, my coach gave me a prescription for success. Practice hard and stay focused. Now let's focus on the present moment with the word presently.
Presently means at the current time or very soon.
You might hear, I'm presently working on a new book.
Or the restaurant will be ready to seat you presently.
It can also be used to smoothly transition a conversation, like, and presently I'd like to introduce our next guest. From the present to preserving the past, our next word is preservation.
Preservation means the act of protecting something from harm or decay.
Like, the Historical Society is dedicated to the preservation of old buildings.
Or conservation efforts are crucial for the preservation of endangered species.
And you see it in everyday life, too. Like, my mom's homemade jam is a testament to her skills in food preservation. Now let's look at a word that implies leadership: preside.
To preside means to be in charge of a meeting ceremony or organization.
You might hear, the judge will preside over the trial.
Or the principal presides over school assemblies.
And it can be used casually, too. Like, my grandpa always presides over family gatherings, making sure everyone feels welcome. Speaking of positions of authority, our next word is presidency.
Presidency refers to the office or term of a president.
You might hear, Lincoln's presidency was a pivotal time in American history.
Or they debated the challenges of the modern presidency.
And of course, it can be used playfully, too. Like, when we were kids, my sister declared herself president of our treehouse. Now for a word that suggests qualities of leadership: presidential.
Presidential relates to the office or duties of a president.
You might hear, the candidates engaged in a series of presidential debates.
Or the presidential inauguration is a historic event.
And it can be used to describe someone who shows leadership qualities even outside of politics. Like, my teacher had a very presidential way of commanding respect in the classroom. Now let's move on to a word that implies respect and admiration: prestigious.
Prestigious describes something that is highly respected and admired.
Like, she won a prestigious award for her scientific research.
Or he attended a prestigious boarding school.
And sometimes it's used more lightheartedly, like winning first place in the chili cook-off was a pretty prestigious accomplishment in our town. From prestigious to probable, our next word deals with making educated guesses, presumably.
Presumably means probably, or it can be assumed.
You might hear, presumably they'll be here soon since they said they were leaving at 5.
Or presumably the store is closed since it's after midnight.
But of course, assumptions aren't always right. Like, I presumably brought my phone with me, but now I can't find it. Now let's look at a similar word: presume.
To presume means to suppose something is true based on probability.
You might hear someone say, I wouldn't presume to tell you how to do your job.
Or I presume you're here to see the doctor.
And sometimes it's used to express a bold assumption, like, I presume you'll be joining me for dinner. Our next word is about triumph and resilience: prevail.
To prevail means to be victorious, or to be the most common or widespread.
You might hear, despite facing many obstacles, he prevailed in the end.
Or, after a long debate, reason prevailed and they made the right decision.
And sometimes it's used to describe a general feeling, like a sense of excitement prevailed throughout the stadium. And finally, the last word for our deep dive today is prevalence.
Prevalence refers to how common or widespread something is.
You might hear, the prevalence of smartphones has changed the way we live.
Or the study examined the prevalence of obesity in different countries.
And sometimes it's used to highlight a concerning trend, like the prevalence of cyberbullying is a serious issue. Wow, we did it. 30 words down, each one with its own special flavor.
That's right. Now it's time to put these words into practice. Don't be shy about using them in your conversations and writing.
Exactly. See if you can sprinkle a few of these words into your everyday life. You might be surprised how much they enrich your communication.
And who knows, you might even inspire someone else to expand their vocabulary too.
So keep practicing and keep learning. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of words.